Welcome back, Cubs. Direwolf here. And today I want to talk to you about the article, I'm Asian, 6 Forms of Racism I Deal With Every Day, written by Dennis Hong for Cracked magazine and published on Cracked.com. For a little bit of background, Cracked.com is a comedy magazine that also talks about the news. Its articles are meant to be a mixture of the two, however it fails at both, as you'll see from this article, in which Dennis will try to convince you and I that though he lives a privileged middle-class American lifestyle, that because he is an Asian American, he lives an oppressed life, every day plagued by acts of racism. This ought to be good. The article reads,
in case my last name doesn't give it away, I'm Asian.
At this moment, please take note that he is implying that it is reasonable and okay for you to notice something about him and then make a logical assumption about his race. This is important because I would find it very funny if later on in this same article he were to contradict himself. But he wouldn't do that because he's a professional, right? I guess we'll see.
And as you might have heard, for non-white people like me, life in this country hasn't always been the mushiest of oysters.
Yes, in the distant past in America, there was racism and violence towards Asians. However, you, Dennis, and your immediate family, and even the next generation back, have not been a victim of any of this racism or violence. In fact, Asians in current year, on average, make more money and have higher educations than their white, black, and Mexican counterparts. In fact, in every way we have of measuring wealth, Asians outperform every other race in America. Even if your grandfather or your great-grandfather was a victim of racism, it does not mean you are. It's not transferable. You get paid for essentially writing a poorly thought-out blog post about how white people are racist, but ironically, you aren't. You can do this and get paid for it, and yet you still think that you're oppressed.
We're mostly past the days when a random bigot would yell chink, jap, or gook at me on the street. If you're an asshole, I'm officially only one of the three.
Well, yeah, because chink means Chinese, jap means Japanese, and gook means Korean.
And in 2016, no one sees me and thinks my only viable career option is being their personal laundromat.
Yes, because racism is no longer socially acceptable, unless, of course, it's towards white people.
But just because it is no longer socially acceptable doesn't mean people still don't harbor some subconscious racist beliefs. No, we may not be surrounded by hooded cults taking a shit in people's yards, but passing silent farts can still be nasty, especially if you don't even know they're doing it. For instance, Number 6. Seemingly innocent comments that have questionable implications.
Before we get to his example, let's listen to what he's actually describing. He's referring to seemingly innocent comments that might imply something that the speaker is not aware of or that is subconscious to the speaker. He's talking about someone unintentionally saying something that someone else finds offensive, not something said out of hate or malice. Either the speaker is ignorant of what they've said is offensive, or, in this case, more likely, the receiver is hypersensitive. In either case, it does not meet the definition of racism. For the speaker to be racist, they'd have to be consciously feeling that their race is superior. And the social justice coined term of subconscious racism is flawed in that they are applying motives and bigotry to thoughts they believe someone is having, and that person also is unaware of those thoughts. If it sounds ridiculous to you for someone to judge someone else on thoughts they believe they are having but are unaware of, then you are correct. So now that we're clear that Dennis is not complaining about actual racism, but rather he's complaining about people saying things that he found offensive, let's move on.
Say I'm at the bar one night, and some random guy starts a conversation with something like this. Where are you from? No, where are you originally from? I mean, where were your parents born?
That's not racist. You just stated you just met this person, and they're trying to learn more about you. When I'm overseas in a country that is not majority white, I get asked where I'm from all the time. It's not racist because I look different, and they want to know more about me. Yes, a racist could ask you this question, but it doesn't mean that if someone asks you this question that they are a racist, or that they are implying anything that is racist.
If you're part of a minority group, questions like these totally make you cringe because you no doubt have heard variations of the same point. On the other hand, if you're not part of a minority group, you might wonder, wait, what's wrong with those? You might even add, as a white friend of mine once did, whatever dude, I've got an exotic sounding name myself. People ask me about that all the time, and I never have a problem explaining. Just chill out. Note for those who just got chills, it's because every single minority reading this article just said in unison, oh, fuck you.
No, fuck you. It's not my problem that you or anyone is offended by a completely reasonable and normal question. But to your assertion that every minority feels the same way you do, that may be true in regressive circles like yours, but that is dead wrong. My Asian wife is very proud of where she comes from, and she loves to talk about it. And also, she asked other Asians all the time where they're from. In fact, I know lots of people from different minority groups that are not so easily offended like you are. And when I traveled to Asia, I got asked by almost every single person I met where I was from, and I was not offended once. It is curiosity, not bigotry. Your hypersensitivity is not my problem, so f*** you.
Even ignoring the fact that his response is a dismissive pile of festering horseshit, even if he did not intend it to be. This is when a tiny bit of steam starts leaking out of my ear holes. When someone asks where I'm from, often the implication is that I'm an outsider. It's a statement of exclusion. That's the difference between a stranger asking a white guy about his exotic last name, and a stranger asking about my other-than-American origins.
First, your friend's example is valid, because other people who are white, that are from Germany, France, or the Netherlands, will also get the same question when someone hears their accent or notices that they look slightly different. White people also get asked where they're from. And second, you're attaching the exclusionary meaning to that statement. The vast majority of people asking where you're from are not saying that you're also not an American. America is a nation of immigrants. People know that you being Asian doesn't make you not American. Someone being curious about your ethnic background is not someone being racist or subconsciously judging you. Someone who is really racist wouldn't care where you're from. They wouldn't even bother asking, because if you looked Asian, they would hate you.
For example, years ago I threw a Halloween party and two random white guys tried to crash it. I let them hang around until they started to harass some of the women there. Then I went up to one of them and politely said, "Hey man, this is a private party. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." In response, he looked at me straight in my apparently not almond-shaped enough for his liking eyes and asked me where I was from. I told him I lived there and that this was my house. To this he replied, "No, where are you originally from? 'Cause this is my turf." And before I could say anything, he sucker punched me in the face. A guy walked into my party, in my house, and punched me because I was supposedly on his turf. Sure, this is a single extreme incident.
Yes, a single extreme incident from one possibly racist asshole. He does not represent the majority of white people, and what he meant by his question does not represent the normal meaning of that question. Do you understand that just because a racist used those words, it does not mean that those words are racist?
And I obviously don't expect that every encounter I have with an unfamiliar white male is going to escalate to a fight. And I now walk around with a bald eagle on my shoulder at all times, just to be sure. But I admit, now when some random guy,
he means white guy,
asks me where I'm from, my guard goes up. Is he genuinely curious about me as a person, or is subtly pointing out that I don't belong here?
That is an irrational response you have because of one bad experience. And just because of that bad experience, it does not mean those words are racist or that anyone from any race cannot say those words. It doesn't matter that it unintentionally triggers you, because the average speaker does not intend any harm when he asked, "Where are you from?" You have no right to accuse someone of racism or subconscious racism for asking this question.
Number 5, it's never a single act that gets to you. Imagine you're trying to get to sleep one night, and just as you start to get cozy, you realize the bathroom faucet is dripping. Every few seconds, drip, drip, drip. Of course you can try to ignore the dripping, but that just makes it even more obnoxious. Finally, at some point, you kick off your covers, and in annoyance, trudge over to the bathroom and tighten the goddamn faucet with a sledgehammer. For some reason, even the most innocent comments about my ethnicity get annoying.
If you are getting annoyed by comments that you know are innocent, that is your fault. Additionally, from your last example, you've proven that you are incapable of determining whether something is racist or a completely normal question. So my question to you is, how many of these drips are actually completely normal and innocent comments that you've only decided are racist when they're not?
Because they don't occur once in a rare while, they occur all the time. And like the drops of water coming out of the faucet, it's the accumulation of one comment after another that throughout an entire life that starts to get to me. At some point, I want to snap back, "I'm a goddamn American, okay?" This is when I point to the bald eagle.
I don't doubt what you wrote further on in this section that you've received thousands of comments that you found offensive, innocent or awkward comments or questions that you found mildly annoying. However, you know the vast majority of these comments were not made out of bigotry or racism. You know they were not said with ill will or to offend you. The speakers did nothing wrong. However, you did choose to be offended and to add additional hateful meaning to their words. That is not their wrongdoing, it's your sensitivity.
Number 4, it puts you into a can't-win situation. A couple years ago, me and a white friend of mine were at a club and a DJ started to play Gundam Style. My buddy turned to me and said, "You should sing along." My reply, "Yeah man, I'm not Korean." His response, "Come on dude, I know you know every word of the song." The first comment, okay, maybe he never realized I'm not Korean, fine. But when I called him out on it, he wouldn't back down. Yeah, that's not cool. With the second comment, his underlining racism was clearly poking through.
Was it? Was it really? Him saying that you know the words to a song, even though it's not a song from your ethnic group, somehow means he secretly thinks that white people are the master race. How? Do you understand that his assumption that you know the words to a song, whether he is right or wrong, does not fit the definition of racism?
Still, it wasn't a big deal, right? I was annoyed because, 1, I'm Taiwanese, and Taiwanese don't speak Korean, and 2, he was like the 50th person to assume that I love the song because I'm Asian, and most importantly, 3, I hate the song.
Those are 3 great reasons why his assumption may have offended, triggered, or annoyed you. But those are piss poor reasons to say that your friend was judging or devaluing you because you are Asian. Because false assumptions and ignorance do not equate to bigotry and hatred. I don't doubt being asked 50 times whether or not this was your favorite song because you're Asian is annoying, but I have a secret for you. Just because you don't like it doesn't make it racist.
But over the next few years, this same friend occasionally made comments about my Asianness. Mostly, it was dumb stuff like calling me a good Asian for singing karaoke. Drip, drip, drip. Still, because the first exchange was already seared in my memory, this continuing comments festered inside my head, and one day I snapped and called him a bigot. The result of the ensuing argument was that we're no longer friends. I stand by my assertion that he acted like a bigot, but ultimately I realized that, in one single moment, I had become that guy. The oversensitive minority with a chip on his shoulder who is quick to take offense at every little thing.
You've actually accurately self-diagnosed your own problem. You've convinced yourself that relatively benign comments actually have a darker and more offensive meaning than they likely intended. And you became sensitive to these comments that you convinced yourself were actually signs of bigotry. And then instead of talking to your friend and telling him what was offending you, you attacked him and called him a bigot. A word that's meaning is very ugly, but also does not apply to this situation. He made a false assumption about you. However, he was not being intolerant of your race, belief, or opinions. He was not judging you or devaluing you, and most likely did not think what he was saying was in any way offensive to you. If he was truly your friend, had you explained to him why what he was saying was offending you and then asked him not to say it again, he likely would have stopped, and you would still have him as a friend today. But you didn't do that. From your own statement, you snapped at him angrily and called him a bigot. You were the one that ended this friendship because of your oversensitivity. What he said may have been ignorant and annoying, but it was not racism or bigotry. The difference being, when you called him the latter too, you assigned a malicious and hateful motive to his words, when he had none. The worst part of it is that you say that you knew he did not know he was offending you, and that you did not say anything. But instead of blaming yourself for not being open and honest about how his words were affecting you, you say the responsibility belongs to white people like him to understand what you think, and to predict how their words will affect you differently than they would affect themselves. It is irrational to expect everyone else in the world to predict your oversensitivity, and it's not their fault that you overreacted. If you didn't like his comments, you should have told him early on. You shouldn't have let it fester over to the point where you snapped on him and destroyed your own friendship.
Number 3. You can be an open-minded person and still be somewhat racist. The most insidious thing about hidden racism is that it plays off our subconscious assumptions we make about other people, and it can be terrifying to confront. The fact is, subconscious racism absolutely exists and can manifest itself in many different ways.
I don't think someone can not be aware that they feel superior to another race. And what Dennis describes in his examples does not define racism. I'll show you what I mean. Take a look at his first 2 examples.
Example 1. You're walking down the street and you see a black person walking towards you, and you clutch your belongings closer to your body.
The person in the first example very well could be a racist, or, based on the context, could be a very reasonable person. What context do you ask? In this situation, this person may feel guarded because in the past they were either witness to or victim to a robbery in a similar situation. The same way Dennis feels guarded every time someone asks him where he's from, because he had one bad experience. But just like how Dennis doesn't think that every white male is going to punch him, the person in this scenario probably doesn't think that every black person is a thief. And just like how Dennis reacts differently when it's one of his white male close friends who asks where he's from, the person in this scenario would not act guarded like this with a close friend who was black. Depending on the context of the scenario, it's very possible this person's reaction does not mean they believe black people are inferior to their race. And at least no more than Dennis's guarded reaction means he believes that white people are inferior to him.
Example 2. In response to Black Lives Matter, you point out that all lives matter, dismissing the unique issues that blacks face in our country.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that comment is patently retarded. The phrase, all lives matter, is not a dismissal of Black Lives Matter. It was a response to the members of Black Lives Matter who were assaulting people and burning down buildings. They were hunting down random white people who had done nothing to them and beating them to a pulp and threatening to burn down their homes. The phrase, all lives matter, was a response to the racist, violent, anti-white rhetoric coming from Black Lives Matter. It was pointing out the hypocrisy that they were complaining about their lives not having value, but then they were devaluing the lives of other people. All lives matter is an inclusive statement saying everyone's life matter, including yours and mine. The phrase all lives matter was the opposite of racist, and the phrase Black Lives Matter and the behavior of the group of Black Lives Matter was very racist. And Dennis, the fact that you do not see that makes me question whether or not you even know what racism is. You're describing racism as someone annoying you while there's people getting pulled out of their vehicles, beat to a pulp, and having their vehicles stolen from them because they were white.
Number 2. It's even hard for a victim of racism to tell where the line is. Here's an article about a Hispanic student who took offense when a white classmate used the term football to describe what we all know is properly termed soccer.
Actually, dumbass, there's large parts of the world where the correct word for soccer is football. And it just so happens this college was celebrating a Latin Heritage Month, which is honoring the culture that uses the word football. There is nothing offensive about this term outside of context, and in context it makes perfect sense.
It goes on to describe the rise of problematic victimhood culture, wherein self-proclaimed victims call for the public shaming and silencing of even the slightest offenders. But do the ridiculous overreactions mean that the issue itself has no merit?
This entire article is a ridiculous overreaction. And yes, the false victimhood culture and the false claims of racism, just like the ones outlined in this article, do distract from and dilute the meaning of real racism. While you're complaining about being mildly annoyed by someone unintentionally offending you, based purely on the fact that you are an oversensitive, perpetual victim. Meanwhile, around the world there is true oppression, with people losing their property, their freedom, and their lives because of the color of their skin.
And finally, number 1. Denying it is just an excuse to be an asshole. If you make a questionably racist comment and offend another person, keep in mind your offensive comment affects them way more than their hurt could ever possibly touch you. And if the issue ever boils down to your right to say whatever you want to say versus another person's right to not feel like shit, guess what? The other person wins.
I disagree. When you make the regressive left the arbiters of what is and what is not offensive, they determine that the OK symbol and milk are racist, and that air conditioning and saying hello is sexist. But saying that all white people should pay reparations is not racist, and that all men are privileged is not sexist. So sorry, not sorry, crybabies don't automatically win. At the beginning of this article, you claimed you were going to show us 6 forms of racism that you face in your daily life. However, instead of doing that, all you've done in the entire article is show us that you do not know what racism is. And you've showed us that you're overly sensitive and easily offended. And that you call everyone who offends you a racist. If a friend of mine comes to me and respectfully says they do not like a certain turn of phrase that I use, I will most likely not use that turn of phrase around them again. However, if they snap at me and call me a racist or a bigot, I'll tell them to f*** off. Which, by the way, Dennis, is exactly what your friend told you to do. Well, Cubs, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment saying whether or not you agree or disagree with my take on this article. As always, I love reading your opinions and having a discussion with you. Direwolf, out. If you want to hear Direwolf and friends streaming live semi-daily on political and social commentary, as well as playing games like Quiplash and Drawful, please check out the YouTube channel Direwolf Radio, which is linked in the description of this video.